Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mickey Dollens. I'm here to give you your Thursday legislative update. Our fearless leader, Madam Chair Andrews, is not able to join us today, so I'm going to host this entire show, just you and I. As we go along, feel free to put in your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Also, forgive my nasally voice. I've got a sinus infection. I spent too much time in my yard over the weekend mowing, weed eating, putting weed kill down. And while I enjoyed doing that, I faced the repercussions of allergies and a sinus infection. But I'm going to pick up some antibiotics this afternoon, so I should be all good to go. It was a little difficult debating all the bad legislation this week with a nasally voice, but thankfully I was able to persevere. I was inspired by the House Democratic Caucus, led by Leader Cindy Munson. The leadership team and all of the House members did a fantastic job of fighting some really terrible bills. It's hard to believe that we're coming up on our second deadline week. We're about to finish up all the Senate bills, and the Senate's about to hear all the House bills. Whether they got through them all or not, we've reached a deadline, and so this is a point. In 1 week, 1 week from today, we'll be on to the budget process. It's hard to believe after that, the session will be over. Everyone will go back to their districts and start campaigning and trying to be reelected. Thankfully, really want to thank the constituents of House District 93 for believing in me enough to encourage no one to run against me. So I'm unopposed, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and helping my friends win their seats back, and also helping a lot of the great candidates that we have earn their seats and be able to get more great representation at the House of Representatives. Hey, Dorothy, thank you so much. I'm glad you're here as well. If you have any questions about any of the bills I go over today, feel free to put your questions in the comments here. So we just got off the House floor. I just got back to my house, and I'm on my living room floor, going to give you an update. Today was pretty contentious. We spent 3 hours on an anti-immigration bill, House Bill 4156. Of course, it passed along party lines, 77-20. And I just want to make it real clear, Leader Munson gave a great debate. And we acknowledge that there is a crisis at the southern border, and it needs to be addressed. We support legal immigration, asylum seekers. It needs reformed. It needs to be fixed. But some of these ideas that are coming from state legislatures are not actually addressing the systemic problems that our federal government needs to address. Today, we heard a bill that, in my opinion, is going to cause more trouble and more harm than good. What this bill would do is, if an undocumented person is found to be undocumented by a police officer, they would be given a misdemeanor $500 fine and then given 72 hours to leave the state. They just have to find the closest state border and leave the state. And on their way out, if they're stopped again and that 72-hour window is closed, they get a felony, and then they have to do prison or jail time. And the reason why I voted against this bill is because talking to law enforcement chiefs, leadership throughout the years, they said that this created a chilling effect on citizens reporting crime. They were afraid to report crimes such as domestic abuse, rape, theft, all of those bad things, because they were afraid that it could bring up their immigration status and they would be faced with the repercussions of given a misdemeanor or a felony, and it creates a chilling effect. And so all the way back from Oklahoma City Police Chief Bill City, the last time an anti-immigration bill like this was passed, they saw an uptick in unreported crimes, and it created a lot of harm in our communities. And so while this bill passed, it will likely be signed into law. I'm afraid that it's going to create more problems and not actually address the systemic problems that we are facing at our southern border. And Congress and the president, they need to get something going. They need to get that addressed really quick. But for us to basically play campaign politics and pass laws that aren't constitutional, but two, aren't really addressing the problem, isn't good for anyone. In addition to that, we had another anti-ballot initiative tactic that made its way through the House floor yesterday. And I'm sorry to say that that one passed as well. This year has been the worst I've seen for ballot initiative attacks, trying to take the will or the power away from the people. This ballot initiative and direct democracy, I've spoken about this quite a bit, it gives people the ability to shape public policy directly and make a change when the legislature refuses to. And in this case, we've heard about raising thresholds, filing fees, geographic distribution, requiring counties to have a certain threshold. This bill, it increases the challenge period from 10 days to 20 days, which isn't as bad as the other one we heard that passed as well. It increased the challenge period on the front end and back end from 10 days to 90 days, which would create significant delays. This bill also imposes a $750 filing fee. The last anti-ballot initiative bill that we heard at least reimbursed the $1,000 filing fee once petitioners reached that signature threshold, the minimum signature threshold. This one just keeps the $750 that a petitioner has to pay the Secretary of State in order to petition the government. But the worst part about this bill is it increases the data points that have to be accomplished from 3 to 4. And right now we have 5 data points. That's the first name, last name, address, birth date, and the city in which you reside. And currently, you have to at least match 3 out of 5 of those to have your name validated on a petition for a signature for a ballot initiative. This is going to raise it 4 out of 5. Okay. Have we had any problems with the current 3 data points in the past? Has it been a way for people to cheat the system? No. But what it has done is in the one time that the new software, which we'll get into that, actually verified signatures was in State Question 820, which was recreational marijuana. And the organizers behind that, they gathered way more signatures than they needed. But because of the 3 out of 5 data points that were required, about 30% of those signatures were deemed invalid. Does that mean that 30% of people who signed it were not registered voters in Oklahoma? No, it doesn't. Maybe some of them were, but a lot of them weren't. For example, I'll take my own name, for example. If I go by Mickey Dollens and I need to sign the ballot and I want to sign a ballot initiative and I sign it Mickey Dollens, if I'm not registered if I sign it Mick Dollens, but I'm registered as Mickey Alden Dollens on my voter registration, the computer software program would find that invalid, and that would be one of the data points that prohibits me from having my signature validated. And that's just one example. Another example is if I say someone gets married, they sign the petition under their maiden name, and then from the time they sign it to the time it's verified, they get legally married, they change their last name, they update their voter registration. Well, if there's any lag in that process and it doesn't match the person's new name to how they signed it, it's an invalid signature. And so this additional data point is no doubt going to toss out an additional numerous amount of valid signatures that would have otherwise counted. And that's terrible because that's that many more hours, that much more money, and that much more effort that signature gatherers have to put in order to simply get a question on the ballot for the people of Oklahoma to vote on. As you know, our ballot initiative process is already the most difficult out of any of the 26 states in America that has this power of direct democracy. And we also have the most difficult process, only 90 days to collect about 90,000 signatures for a statutory amendment like medical marijuana, and only 90 days to collect 180,000 signatures for a constitutional amendment like Medicaid expansion. Both were accomplished within the past 5 years, but it was an extreme accomplishment. It was extremely difficult. If you compare that to other states, most states have about 1 year to gather signatures, and other states like Ohio have an infinite amount of time. But you can take as long as you want to gather signatures as long as you meet a threshold. We also have the highest signature threshold of any state. We're tied with Arizona, actually. So the 5% to do a veto referendum, to get a statutory amendment question on the ballot, you have to collect 8% of the signatures of the total amount of signatures cast in the last gubernatorial election. And to do a constitutional state question, you have to collect 15% of the total votes cast in the last gubernatorial election. Those are very high standards. So why does it make sense to continue adding more obstacles for the people to be able to get their questions on the ballot? Well, it's simple. They want to take that power away because it conflicts with the majority's agenda. For example, ending gerrymandering, raising minimum wage, implementing campaign finance reform, restoring reproductive freedoms. All of these things are very possible and likely to happen. And so the GOP is trying to get out in front of it to make that process much more difficult. Something that our framers would be very upset with, because Oklahoma was the first state in the entire nation to include ballot initiatives in our original Constitution. So I did debate against that. Look for my social media page either later tonight or tomorrow. I'll post my debate, and would appreciate you sharing that. Okay, we've got someone weighing in. Hey, Dorothy says, will this eventually be the same way voters sign in for voting ballots? Signatures are different on voter ID and driver's license concerning middle initials. Yeah, that's the confusion, right? So you have to basically, the exact way that is on your voter identification card is how you must sign the signature petition, the ballot initiative petition. One deviation, if you leave out one hyphen, it will be invalid. And so that's, Representative Ranson gave a great example of, I think actually Representative Nichols from Tulsa used Representative Ranson as an example. We all know her as Trish Ranson, right? Well, her legal name is Patricia Ranson. And so if she were to go and sign a petition as Trish Ranson, that'd be one of the data points that would be invalid, even though she has every right to sign that petition and have her signature counted. All right, moving on. We had an interesting bill. NIL in college athletics has really changed the sports landscape. As you know, NIL is an acronym for name, image, and likeness. And this was an interesting bill. It's kind of contentious. Had a couple of disagreements with a colleague of mine, but we reconciled it, and we hope for the best, because while this law hasn't been implemented by the NCAA, and I hope it's not, the state of Oklahoma will be ready to comply with this new law that would enable for universities and colleges to directly pay college athletes. And I fully support the current NIL system. In fact, about 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote and passed the NIL law that still embodies the spirit of amateur athletics. Some of you may know that I played college Division I football. I was on a full ride scholarship. And at the time, college athletes could not get any sponsorships or endorsements from third parties separate from the university. Think Nike, Under Armour, that type of thing. It wasn't allowed. You couldn't even be on a video game. And so eventually, 3 years ago, when we passed the NIL deal, this said that college athletes can now enter into contracts with sponsorships and endorsements and make money that way. They can sell their autographs and that type of thing. However, there could be no money coming from the university directly to the player. And I liked that because it embodies the spirit of amateur athletics. I came up with this idea. I didn't really come up with it. I just basically implemented it because after I played college football, I was recruited to the United States bobsledding team, and I competed on Team USA for about 3 years. And at the time, I lived at Lake Placid, New York in the Olympic Training Center, and we were given room and board, a meal ticket, but we were not compensated by Team USA or the US government, but we could pursue sponsorships and endorsements. So BMW, they made our sleds, Under Armour gave us apparel, we were able to enter contracts with supplement companies, and we were able to get money to at least fly around the world and compete through sponsorships. But it was a great thing because as Olympians, we're members of the United States bobsledding team, we were still considered amateur athletes. We were not professional. And so I said, wouldn't that be a great concept to take to collegiate athletics? And that's what we created, and that's what currently exists right now. college athletes can monetize off of their talent and their name, image, and likeness, so they can be on video games. There's just so many ways that they can capitalize on their popularity and their athletic ability and all the talents that go along with that. I debated against this bill because it now allows for universities to be able to directly compensate student athletes. And it has no restrictions on being able to appropriate state tax dollars to the athletes directly. Now, do I think that OU or OSU are going to use state appropriated dollars to pay student athletes? I don't think they will, because they make so much revenue from the actual games. They make over $1 million a game easy from concessions and sales and tickets, and so they're able to do that. TV contracts. I mean, SEC is really big, so I don't think that'll be a problem for the bigger schools. But I think that for the smaller schools who are appropriated tax dollars, who have minimal fan attendance, and they're not making much money revenue off of actual performance football games, they're going to be looking for a competitive edge. They could look at it as an ROI. If they're able to recruit better players, they're going to have a better record. They're going to attract more fans, but they need revenue. They need some money to pay players directly. In that case, there's nothing in this law that would prohibit the smaller schools who don't monetize much off the games. Nothing preventing them from using our taxpayer dollars to directly pay athletes, and not just football, but think any sport: basketball, baseball, volleyball, golf, anything like that. But your big money maker, of course, is basketball and football. And an additional problem I have with this is the transfer portal in NCAA. College athletics, the transfer portal's gotten out of control. Imagine if Caleb Williams came to Oklahoma and was appropriated tax dollars and then decided the next year he's going to get the transfer portal and go to USC. Those are the type of things that I was just cautioning against. And there's a lot of unintended consequences in bills, and that's why I like for everything to be framed out. I would love for there to be a amendment in that bill, and hopefully the NCAA will implement it when they create the rules around this framework that says that none of this money can be appropriated to athletes that come from taxpayer dollars. It has to be separate for the athletics department as opposed to what's appropriated from the state. And a lot of people brought up the fact that, aren't even the author who presented the bill mistakenly said that our college coaches are paid millions of dollars a year using taxpayer dollars, and that's not true. They are paid from the athletics department. So there's just, unfortunately, not a lot of preparation behind this bill. The person answering questions, and I really enjoyed listening to the Senate debate on this as well, where they seemed a bit more versed in understanding of the bill. All right, and then the next point we have here was a really important, just a hugely consequential bill, Senate Joint Resolution 34, which would have completely upended the Judicial Nominating Commission. It's unbelievable that some people were open to the idea of allowing our governor or future governors to directly appoint Supreme Court justices and other important judges across the state. The whole reason why we have the Judicial Nominating Commission is because back in 1965, there was a terrible bribery scandal, and it involved some Supreme Court justices. And at the time, the people of Oklahoma, via ballot initiative, voted to create the JNC as a way to have an impartial nominating commission that would give the governor 3 options to choose from that were vetted, and hopefully would prevent anything like the bribery scandal from ever happening again. And the first time it was implemented was in 1967. And guess what? Since then, we haven't had anything like what happened in 1964. And it's been a huge success, and has been repeatedly called the gold standard for selecting judicial nominees across the whole United States. And I was thankful that through passionate debate and awesome questions from colleagues on the House Democrat side, and even our colleagues on the Republican side, who were very well versed in this. Anthony Moore asked incredible questions, gave great debate. He said, "Don't DC my Oklahoma." because that was one of the counterpoints of the people pushing for this. Is like it works well in D.C., which is, you can argue that it doesn't. We've seen some Supreme Court justices stacked recently that has had monumental consequences. Roe v. Wade, for example. And so we're keeping it impartial. I would actually say, let's go back. Let's go. I think that the U.S. Supreme Court should be done like it is here in Oklahoma with the J&C. Isn't LePac going to try to bring SJR 34 back to the floor, another vote? Hey, Ryan, I appreciate that. He did capture his bill. So after the bill failed, he was able to capture it, which means that in a couple of days, maybe next week, if he wanted to, he could bring it back up for a vote. But that vote, I think it only got 34 votes. Of course, it needed 51 to go to the vote of the people. And so he could probably put it back up for a vote, but I don't foresee it passing. There was an interesting letter that was leaked that Speaker McCall wrote to members, basically saying that if you don't vote for this bill, not going to get any support in your upcoming elections. If you want to look into that, Trey Savage on NonDoc has posted that on nondoc.com, and you can read into that. And I know that upset a lot of the members to have their arms twisted like that. So we'll see. Also, SJR is a way that the legislature can get a ballot initiative straight to the vote of the people. And in my debate, I said it takes about 20 minutes. It probably actually takes about 2 days, if that. Well, it probably takes about 2 hours in each chamber to pass an SJR at the very most. And then it goes directly to the vote of the people without even needing the governor's approval. The governor chooses the date on which the people will vote on it, usually a general election if it's passed through the legislature or a primary. But just juxtapose that to the difficulties that your every average day citizen has to go through, all of the hoops to file a ballot initiative, to collect the almost 100,000 signatures, sometimes almost nearly 200,000 signatures within 90 days, and millions of dollars. It takes months, if not years, to do for the whole process. But over in the House, we could just do it like that. And that's why I voted against it, because I kind of debated. I had a moral dilemma with this. Me really supporting direct democracy, I think that people should have every chance to vote on legislation. But unless the people have the ease of access to getting questions on the ballot as the legislature does, I don't feel it's justifiable for me to have to vote yes just to send it to the vote of the people, especially when it's very consequential, devastating, terrible policy. And so there's such a discrepancy in ease that the legislature has to send a vote of the people as compared to everyday grassroots Oklahomans. And that's another reason why I voted no on that bill. All right, we got a couple more bills, and then I'll let you go. It looks like we've got next week, let's be on the lookout for the chaplain school bill. There's this push to, easy right off the bat, easy fix to this: invest in our schools, invest in trained professional mental health counselors. Every school should have one. Unfortunately, the majority party, the most of them anyway, feel like we can rely on nonprofits and charities and volunteer work to fill the vacuum of what we refuse to invest in our core services. And that's just not going to work. I was on Flashpoint last week, and thank you to everyone who gave me kind compliments on that. But one of the first things I said about this bill was replacing trained mental health professionals in schools with chaplains is like asking a nurse tech to perform open heart surgery. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the nurse tech and nothing against chaplains, but they're not trained to do this job. And in this bill, it's only a one-page bill. It's very ambiguous. Chaplain isn't even defined. Army chaplains have quite a few certifications and requirements they have to achieve in order to hold that title. There's nothing like that in this bill. There's not even a requirement for a background check, no qualifications. It's just a bad bill all around. And so I'm really looking forward to asking a lot of questions on this bill. I'm going to debate against it. I hope it doesn't pass. This is also a continuation of the dissolvement between church and state. Fortunately, we've seen a lot of that this session between founding the nation's very first publicly funded private school, St. Isidora. You've got the wealthiest religious institution in the history of the world who wants to use our tax dollars to make a virtual charter school. You've got Ryan Walters that is, according to grant writers, not filling out federal funding for our rural schools because apparently he thinks that virtual charter can go fill the vacuum, is in my opinion. So there's just a lot that we're going to be getting prepared for next week. I know that that's going to probably be one of the bills. Every bill in the House and Senate will have to be heard. Those that don't make it heard by next week will be dead. And since we'll be starting a whole new legislature, bills will be refiled and next year, and we'll start the whole process over again once elections are completed and we have new members. And hopefully we obviously retain all of our incumbents, but hopefully we pick up a few more. I feel pretty confident in that. Had a chance to meet with most of our candidates who are running for office, and I was very impressed by their work ethic and their ability to represent themselves and amplify their voices, amplify their constituents' voices once they get elected, hopefully. So I'll be sure to read all the bills coming up when they're released later this weekend. And I look forward to updating everyone next Thursday with another legislative update. Until then, I hope you have a restful weekend and stay safe out there. Thank you, Oklahoma.